Well, hey everybody, welcome to this week's show of California Haunts Radio. My name is Charlotte. I'm your hostess for the night, and I think we've got a pretty good lineup. Mr. Will Hart is going to be on to talk about the lost city of Atlantis with us. But this is a real special show because, of course, this is our first show of 2021, and I'm real excited about it because we're not only going out Facebook Live, we're going out YouTube TV, and we're also going out Periscope tonight. So that's a newie. So, we are the California Haunts Paranormal Investigation Team located in Sacramento, California. You can find us at www.californiahaunts.org. We're 30 strong up and down the state of California. We also have people in Hawaii and Oregon and Washington. So we're spread out pretty good. So if you guys have any paranormal issues that you need, send us an email. Anyway, without further ado, I'm going to bring Will on so we can start talking about Lost City of Atlantis. And to give you a little background of my interest in it is that many years ago, my father had this book laying around the house called Chariots of the Gods. And I really got into it. I must have been about 9 or 10. I was quite the bookworm as a kid, 8, 9, 10 years old. I was reading stuff like that. So I remember reading that book, and I knew all the pages in it verbatim. So I really got into stuff like that. So this is why I'm so excited to have Will on. So let's go ahead and bring Will in and get the show on the road. Hello, Will.
Hi. Is the sound okay?
Yeah, sounds great.
Okay, great. Well, we're ready to rock and roll.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about yourself, sir.
Well, I grew up in California, have been living all over the place and traveling the world for a long time, and currently live in Nevada. Unfortunately, I'm very sad of what's been happening in California that I've been observing for a few years. I'm attached to California. Beautiful, beautiful place. But what bad luck this past year, my God. So I send you my my best vibes. But things turn around this year.
It's been kind of crazy here, I'll tell you. This whole year has been a mess. I think all the way around. There's a lot of states like that, though. So tell me about go ahead.
Okay. Like you, it was probably 1971 or 2. I picked up Von Daniken's book, Chariot of the Gods, and I read that, and it propelled me to go to Mexico. Actually, I spent a year down in Mexico, traveling to all the major sites and many minor sites, all the museums. I was really, I got very passionate about it. And honestly, I didn't see what I would say was solid evidence of ancient aliens until I got to, and it was last trip, I got all the way down to the border of Guatemala and visited many, many sites. They were intriguing and mysterious. But it wasn't until I got to the site outside of Mexico City, Teotihuacan, that I felt we couldn't have built this. This had to have been built by some higher intelligence, much more advanced culture. It's immense. It's just an immense site that's staggering. And I just went back 3 years ago, felt the same way, felt it all over again. So that's kind of where I began. But when I was in Mexico, it ties into Atlantis. I started to run across and various books and writings by different people that were pointing to Atlantis, a connection between the early cultures of Mexico, like the Olmecs and the Maya, and Atlantis. Because when you think about it, and both of those cultures said, where did we come from? Well, we came from a place to the east. Well, the only thing is east, the ocean, is the Atlantic Ocean. And they said they had, they came by boat. And also the Aztecs, that's what they told Cortez and the Spaniards in the 16th century, that they had come from. Actually, they pointed to the north, but that's confusing because, it's very complicated. I consider the Aztecs the most mysterious culture. And I'm even over Egypt because I don't consider the pyramids on the Giza Plateau and many of the other pyramids didn't really have anything to do with us, with human beings. It's a different culture entirely. They're so super advanced in the architecture, because of the amount of stones, because of the precision stonework, the precision engineering and architecture. The Egyptians were not capable of that. They were just out of the Stone Age. And these things create a lot of psychological dissonance in people, because they hear from archaeologists and historians, that the Egyptians, drag 70-ton, 100-ton, 200-ton stones across the city with ropes and up ramps and so on.
Right.
Well, show us. Since you can do it, since you can get a bunch of laborers and rope and a 70-ton stone, show us how it was done. Well, of course, they won't do that. They've actually tried to on a smaller scale, and even failed on a smaller scale. And then they hide it. They hide their failures. I can talk about ancient aliens, Atlantis, paranormal, whatever you want to talk
direction it goes, because it's all fascinating to me. Because, like, I was just thinking when you were talking about the pyramids and stuff, I was thinking of Chariots of the Gods, where it looks like there's, hieroglyphics of the guys sitting there in spacesuits, stuff like that.
Right. Well, that's just it. We have many different threads of evidence. Those kind of, statues and figures that you find all over the world, very strange looking, and they definitely look like aliens, and they go back to the earliest cultures. Same thing with cave paintings. The best cave paintings are actually in North Africa, at a place called Tassili and Niger. Fantastic cave paintings there. I mean, they're very well done, they're Neolithic. They're at least 10,000 years old. And you look at the artwork and you go, my God, an artist could have done this today. And some of them just look flat out like aliens. And we find that in Australia. And we find it here in the U.S., in the South, in the reservation territory, the Navajos and the Hopi, who have, who point to star people, who have, their histories contain that. And they're saying, they will come back. So we get all these threads of evidence. We have archaeological evidence. We have we go back to Sumeria, the literature. What does it say? It says that an advanced race came to Earth. They lived here a long time, and then they created human beings, bioengineered. Now, well, these things, it sounds like very primitive kind of descriptions, but when you realize that, okay, we know how to do those things now, and we're not that advanced. We just found DNA 70 years ago, found the DNA, the structure of it, and so on, and we could bioengineer creatures that we see that we call a bird head and a human body. And so on. We can do similar things now through transgenic engineering. So any advanced race, and just logically, scientists don't disagree with, let's say, Eric von Däniken, myself, or the Ancient Alien Show. They do not disagree. There are advanced races out there in the universe, because the universe is virtually infinite. And how do we know? How can anybody say, well, no, there's no, they agree with that. What they don't agree with is that they ever came to Earth. And what people like myself and Eric are trying to point to is, yes, they did come to Earth, and we have the evidence that they came. We have it in Egypt, in Sumeria, we have it in Turkey, we have it in many different countries. Now, where does Atlantis factor into this? My approach is different, in that forget about, and this is what people have been getting stuck on. You're going to find Atlantis at the bottom of the ocean. The Atlantic Ocean is very, very deep. We know, Plato said, Atlantis slipped into the sea. There was a massive natural disaster, and it went into the ocean. It's on the bottom of the ocean. So I said, no, wait a minute. How are we going to get to the bottom of the ocean to find Atlantis? And that's why nobody's been successful And they start pointing all over the world. Well, it was in South America, it was here, it was there. No, Plato told us exactly where it was. It was off the coast of Iberia. That's Portugal, Spain, and then North Africa. It was off the coast there, and not that far off the coast.
Okay.
All right. So I reason that there must be, and because Plato also said, even before the disaster happened, the Atlanteans were a seafaring power. They went into the Gibraltar Strait, through it, went into the Mediterranean Sea, and they colonized North Africa. I said, okay, if they colonized North Africa, then the North Africans should be different. We should find genetic evidence that they're different. And I did find it. And what most people don't know, and historians and archaeologists and anthropologists keep this, they don't deny it if you confront them. The original inhabitants back to the Paleolithic were, quote unquote, white people, not black Africans. The indigenous people are called the Amazigh tribes. They're white, blonde hair, blue eyes, brown hair, like we look like, but they're not European. They have different DNA. So I'm mostly based, the hard evidence to me is the DNA. They're different. It's different than European. It's different than sub-Saharan African. You have a different tribe that built pyramids, that built stone circles. They go all the way back to the Paleolithic era. So where do they come from? If they're white people and they're not African, they're North African, they're not European, they're indigenous to North Africa. Where did they come from? And
Interesting.
Plato tells you. He flat out just says Atlantis colonized North Africa, and they went for the reason. That's how the Greeks got involved with Atlantis, and how that history even came about. Consider that in Morocco, the main mountain range is the Atlas Mountains. Plato is the source of the Atlantic Ocean. If you look in any dictionary, encyclopedia, he is attributed to the first person to the Atlantic Ocean. So all of these things converge. And then you have, where did pyramids originally come from? Now, if we go to the island that is off of Morocco, there's a series of islands called the Canary Islands. On those islands, when the Spaniards went and colonized those islands in the 16th, 15th century, they ran into a tribe that they couldn't figure out because they were white people, but they looked just like Europeans, but they weren't. They spoke a different language. They dressed differently. They built pyramids. They mummified their dead. They're called the Gotcha. Okay, so right. Well, then do they have a different DNA? And I found they also have a distinctly different DNA than European. Well, where did they come from? And they have Rh negative, which people often say it's alien. It came from Atlantis. Rh negative is a very interesting blood group, and it's like no other because Rh negative is the universal donor. In other words, I don't care what, if you're type O, I'm type A, we can both take Rh negative, O negative. In other words, it's the substrate blood type. Our blood, any other blood, A or B or AB, will recognize it and accept it as self because it's the most primitive, right?
Right.
I know I'm throwing a lot of different things out there.
No. I understand. I got it. Because I was just thinking of a Spanish teacher I had in high school, and she was from the area you were talking about, and she was blonde hair, blue eyed, and I never could understand that.
Yeah. Well, now what happened was historically, and the reason people get confused by it is the Arabic Islamic cultures came in there about the 8th century. and they colonized. They took over North Africa, and then they intermarried with the native people. So you get a lot of people who look Arabic, but you also get people with blonde hair and blue eyes, who are the original people, and they're all mixed together now. But the Amazic tribe tries to maintain their own independence, right? Their own culture, but having, like every native culture, they have a very difficult time doing it. You know, civilization, that's the nature of civilization. So that's a lot of the most solid evidence I use, but I use, it's not just on that side, because they also, you know, migrated, just to survive. The Mayan, they all went into Mexico, because it was an island chain. It wasn't one island. There was a large island, but there were other islands that were all related. And those on the western side of it went into Mexico and the coastal region. They also went into the Mississippi River area and built mounds, mound builders. And they're basically pyramids, you know, without the stones. So we have the similar cultural artifacts. And as far as I'm concerned, the pyramids originally came from Atlantis, the pyramid building, and went into Portugal and spread out from there in Europe. It went into North Africa, and you find the same things in North Africa. The same types of stone circles, you know, the really kind of primitive looking things are not that primitive, really.
Right.
Dolmen and big menhir, the big standing stones. You find them in Morocco, you find them in Tunisia, and then Algeria, you find those. And in fact, it was the Amazic, these people I'm talking about from Atlantis originally, that did the cave art in Algeria, the place I called Tassili and Algiers. They're the ones that painted all that. And when they painted all that 10,000, 12,000 years ago, they also put giraffes, elephants, and that made climatologists rethink things. And they found stream beds. They found evidence that the animals we associate with Southern Africa 10,000, 12,000 years ago were in North Africa too. And then the Sahara Desert crept in and took over. So it was all, that makes a lot more, when you think about the Great Pyramid and the pyramids in Egypt, that makes a lot of sense. They weren't just built when it was desert. You see what I'm saying?
It makes a lot of sense.
It was more,
makes a lot of sense.
There was grasslands and things more like in the southern part of Africa. So we have to go back that far and realize, oh, okay, the landscape was totally different. Because it's hard to look at the Great Pyramid and the rest of the pyramids in Egypt and go, this doesn't make any sense. Right out in the barren desert, you're going to do all this and build so-called civilization. Well, we didn't do it. It happened a long time ago. And I present my evidence to a certain extent online, you know, in Facebook pages that I have and different things. I try to, you know, it's a little different just because of the medium. In a book, you know, you go on and on and on. And I got to do, you know, posts with an image, and then because people are going fast, and you know, just enough text to give them the idea of what's going on. And then I do as many as I can, you know, linked together. And one site, one page I have is Atlantis Risen, because I am publishing a book within the next 2 months called Atlantis Risen, which I'm presenting, you know, all my research that we're going over here a little bit, so that people can think it through for themselves. Atlantis, really, though, a lot of people have this imaginary view of Atlantis that it was some super high tech. It wasn't super high tech, but it was technological. But their technology was a little different. And there's one thing that they were able to do that you can only, like, I notice you do paranormal topics too, right?
Yeah.
We can't figure out how did people lift 50-ton, 20-ton stones when they had no technology. And it seems like they had paranormal technology that they knew how to either levitate, use magnetism in some way, and they were able to move the stone. That's a difficult topic, and
It
because
is
it
a
gets pretty
difficult
complex.
topic because you think about like all the theories that have been out there where they had the slaves dragging them up the ramps and all that kind of stuff, which would take years and years to build these things. It's ridiculous. I mean, it would take way too long, and the steeper the ramp, forget it. You know, I mean that's obvious.
Right.
So it had to be
And
something
the Great
either
Pyramid
like
would be. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
right,
Go ahead.
right. So it would either be something like mind over matter, levitation kind of thing, or I hate to say a spacecraft or something that was able to pull these things up, for them to put it there.
Right, and I think, and there's a division in there. You know what a dolmen is, right?
Yeah.
It's just it looks primitive. It's just two flat walls and then a flat roof.
Right.
Right. It's very primitive. Right. They're not really. They're deceptively complicated. And when you try to figure out the largest one that I know of is this thing called Menga, and it has 180-ton slabs on the top. Well, we'd have a difficult time with a crane now. I mean, a huge crane lifting 180 tons up. If we go to Baalbek, 800-ton stones, we don't have a crane that could lift there's no mobile crane that can lift 800 tons. And we don't have flatbed trucks. I mean, I try to point things out also by using modern technology as a comparison. I found that there was a sculptor who created a 340-ton sculpture, and he had to move it from a quarry outside of LA into LA to the museum. And it took a truck that had 28 wheels that was a block long, and it could not go on the highway because it would crush the highway. So it had to go on back roads and things, and it took them all day long to go 8 miles. I try to say, well, now try to look at that truck and try to picture people trying to lift it physically. Somehow, I don't know why, but somehow our scientific education doesn't compute when people look at these ancient things and believe that human beings could lift these stones up, massive stones. I just have to laugh. I just throw up my hands. It's kind of frustrating. It's psychological dissonance, really intense order. And I try everything to get through to people because this is important. Why is it important? Because if we don't know our ancient history, then we don't know our own identities. Because our identities are up in the air. In the religious, are we evolutionary products? But what the ancient texts say is we're products of gods. In other words, what are gods? A higher, superior race. They're beyond us. They're below the supreme God. It's another race that we're products of that they bioengineered us. Now, which ones are we? We have to recover the history to find that out. And if we don't, we run the risk of just going off the and to me, we're going off the rails. What's science doing? People go, whoa, science, whoopee. Yeah, right. They gave us the atomic bomb. They've given us 50,000 different poisonous chemicals, and on and on. They do good and they do equally bad things. Huge things that can destroy the whole planet. So we don't have this thing together because we're off the rails. And then people think, well, it's ancient history. What? It's over. Gone. What do we need? No, it's not. Right now is the net result of all of history is rolled up and compressed into this moment. You and I are the result of history. Everything going on the planet right now. Everything we look at that's already been destroyed, including Atlantis. Atlantis goes back, and people, oh, it's just a fantasy. Really? What about Sumeria? Nobody believes Sumeria was real 200 years ago until they dug it up in 1859. And now everybody goes, the Anunnaki and this and that and this and that. We didn't even know it, and we still don't.
When you
So,
say
you know,
destroyed, like where Atlantis is concerned, could it have been like you were talking about how the pyramids certainly weren't built out in the middle of nowhere, because they were cities. Could it just be because there was a massive weather shift on the Earth? Where was Atlantis? In
yeah,
Atlantis' case, the
yeah,
waters
and we
came up,
know
and that was it.
okay. There seems to be a convergence of natural disasters. When we know there was an ice age, and the melt started, and it did. The water levels of the oceans have risen about 300 feet. So everything changed. It's true. It's factual. Scientists don't deny it. That happened. So, but it's hard for us to picture that, because our time frames are so short and narrow. Each generation, I mean, and we're through, and we forget history quickly. Sumeria is a good example. There it was. It was right in the Iraqi desert, the Iran desert, and it was all, piles, and people didn't know. They forgot what the piles were. There were cities buried under the sand, just like the pyramids and Sphinx and so on in Egypt. And they just are forgotten. And it's pretty strange when you think about it. And here we are on this planet and trying to keep track of things, and it's not that easy. So if you have any specific questions, fire away.
Well, that's Charlie. The thing. I was just thinking about the thing about the aliens or building those pyramids, or mental. It might have been a combination of both, because, like you say, if we were technically bioengineered, or we have this alien DNA within us, there's the capability that's well hidden now. Of course, all these years later, but there's a capability that's well hidden that we could be able to do stuff like that. Like, I mean, like some of the accounts of UFOs. Of people being abducted, they say how the aliens don't talk to them directly, they talk to them telepathically. Right. So, I mean, if this bioengineering is going on, then at some point we were probably a lot stronger in those abilities, which would have allowed us to get those big rocks up.
I think that's true. And we did have more paranormal. We were in touch with those things. And we've shifted. Technologically, we have a certain kind of technology now, but also our minds have changed. We're much more logical, and which is good in a way and has its limits in another way. Because if you believe too much in the mind and you start dismissing these other parts of humanity that are in our past, we're going to get narrower and narrower until we become less than human, really. Because what we're seeing what happens. Artificial intelligence. Do we really want to go the way of robots? Do we want to get programmed in the society to the degree where we're acting more like machines and interfacing with machines and becoming more like machines and so on, which looks like the way it's going? Or do we want to keep I think what you're trying to do is bring, these other aspects in, right? From the paranormal,
right.
Psychic phenomena. We have those things. We're communicating that way all the time. We're just not aware of it as much as people used to be.
Right.
We're very,
I know. I know little children are born with the ability, and up until a certain age, that does come out more, because we have that. We run into a lot of cases like that, and then once they hit a certain age, it's like they get deprogrammed because they got other influences on them, and then they're no longer they no longer use it.
Yeah, and there's just different ways to shut that down. I watched it with my kids too. As soon as they went to school, they started changing, started getting a little more boxed in. And I know my youngest daughter was very artistic, and her art then, when she got in school a few years, it became, I don't know how to describe it exactly. It just wasn't as expressive. It became more like boxed in.
Now, here's a question I have for you, real quick. I'll have to interrupt. The Bimini Wall that everybody talks about so much, and everybody thought, for years that might have led, been part of Atlantis or led to Atlantis. What do you think the Bimini Wall is?
it's interesting you bring that up because I have my team, the first guy that I signed up, I'm going to do an expedition actually to the Bimini Wall area. Now, I was going to try to do it this year. Well, COVID has whacked everything all over the place. And it's very hard to plan anything because am I going to go and travel around, with COVID going on and go to, but we had planned to go to Bimini. He's a diver, a very, very well-known diver, and we're going to work together on this. I would go around that whole, actually, Cuba has more interesting ruins than the Bimini Wall off the coast of Cuba. So we're going to go there, and then we're going to go over to the Yucatan and the Maya region and connect these things together. Also, don't forget that when you talk about Bimini, you're also talking about, the triangle, the Bermuda Triangle. That's right there. Right. And when you talk about that and Bimini, you got to bring in Coral Castle. Right?
Right.
At least Calendar said that he was in vortex. He chose Homestead, Florida to build his castle because there was a vortex there. Well, what did he mean by vortex? And that's another thing we've got to recover. And it's very frustrating that he said he would have given all of the knowledge he had if even one scientist had been curious enough to ask him questions, and none did. That's unfortunate. And that's a problem we have with science. We have too many scientists whose minds are closed. They're just flat out closed to certain things. And it seems like they talk about being, objective and scientific and so on, but they're not. Most archaeologists, to me, are a joke. The only one that I really respect is Robert Temple. He's a serious, objective scientist. And his mind is open to be a scientist, your mind has to be totally open. You can't go in with preconceptions and then look at all this evidence. Well, you already know what it is. No, you don't. Nobody can explain the Great Pyramid. Nobody. The ridiculous ramps and all that, it's just nonsense that they put on pieces. Anybody can draw something up on a piece of paper. Anybody can make any claim, scientifically prove it. And I've challenged them over and over again. Prove your proposals. If you're going to be scientific, if you just want to make it an art form, archaeology, and that's all it is, because they don't prove anything, and they make up stories. That's all you're doing. That's all. I demand science, and I give it. Here are my facts. Here is my evidence. Now challenge it. Let's see who's right.
And what you say as far as the landmass makes sense to me. I was always fascinated in school about the whole thing of the land rift. How everything broke apart. Because really, if you take a globe and you cut it up, I did this when I was in school. That's just how I am. You get your scissors and you start cutting around the United States, and you start cutting around Europe and all this, and you get some glue out. You can pretty much glue that stuff together to one big landmass. So it makes sense. A big land. Yeah. So it makes sense that everything, even under the ocean, for that matter, was all connected before the weather shifted and all that happened.
So we have now. Here's another aspect on Atlantis. I mentioned the Canary Islands, and I mentioned that indigenous culture. And we know exactly that they were on the islands in the 1500s when the Spaniards went there, and nobody knew they were there in Europe. They were Europeans, but they weren't. And we know it genetically. We know it through language and so on. They battled. They had a war that went on a long time, but they weren't exterminated. They weren't extinct. But they lost their culture, just like other cultures around the planet. The Spanish just ran them over and absorbed them, intermarried, like they did in Mexico. And that was it. The culture got lost, and a new culture got formed. So there are plenty of people, like in Mexico too, that are, partially Aztec and partially Spanish. And in those islands, a lot of people have the native blood. Okay, now north of there are the Azores Islands, and only in the last 5. Now this is a very strange thing, and people need to think about it really. For 500 years, they claimed no human beings had ever lived there. The Portuguese claimed when they went in there and then colonized it, there were no people there and no evidence of people had ever inhabited those islands. 5 years ago, archaeologists finally started admitting, first to each other, that there were a lot of evidence. In fact, there are pyramids on the Azores Islands, not off, just offshore, 130 of them on the islands. Well, come on, we've been lied to for 500 years. Well, what? Because the Azores Islands and the Canary Islands were very close to the eastern edge of Atlantis. And those are products, those pyramids are all products of Atlantis and the culture that was on there. We don't know. I surmise, because there were no people there, I surmise that they went into Europe. They were the people that went in, became the Celts and all those people in Scotland, Ireland, throughout France and everything. That's where those early people came from. The cultures that are considered strange, hard to understand, and so on. But it all goes back to the same source in time. So I'm saying that, look, here's the contradiction scholars have with Plato. They consider him a brilliant philosopher. He's one of the architects of Western intellect and our civilization. But they laugh at him about Atlantis. Well, come on. Which way is it? He said he was telling the truth, that this was the real history. And he also, one of the points that he was trying to make was, we've actually gone through this cycle many, many times. Civilizations have arisen, they've fallen. But the record goes back. We've just lost it many thousands of years. And that's one of the things we got to get through our heads, is lose these little short-term dates. We have 5,000 years ago. So then just in the recent years, they said, well, Göbekli Tepe goes back 12,000 years. All of a sudden then, we got to keep these people honest, and hold them accountable. While we're doing our own research and figuring out ourselves. So that's what I present. That's kind of how I see the story of Atlantis unfolding and how they migrated eastward into Iberia, which is, Portugal, Spain, and all those countries, and the artifacts you find there. And the people called the Iberians, that are mysterious people. They don't know where they came from. The same thing with North Africa. See, that's where the Atlanteans went to on that side. On the other side, they went into Mexico. And it's very logical. It actually, like you were saying about the Earth, it becomes, you see it and realize, well, this is actually pretty simple. It's a mystery to us because we made it that. But it's pretty simple. And to me, people ask for disclosure, like we go back to the UFO issue. Disclosure, I hear this all the time. There's been disclosure for decades now, if you're paying attention. If you're not, you go, how come they don't land on the White House lawn? They practically did in 1952, if you know the record. They buzzed the White House 2 weekends in a row. That was message. And they did it back in the 50s. The unfortunate thing people got to start thinking about is disclosure may have already happened. And they decided, we don't get it because we're not ready. And it just stuns me when people keep going. And I show them hundreds of different cases. What are you talking about? There's not disclosure. You've got commercial pilots. You've got military pilots. You've got police, Army personnel. You've got tons of credible witnesses and photographs. And come on, 24 governments have opened their files in recent years. The U.S. is the only one that hasn't, but is starting to. We've got a dump coming up this week. This is real stuff. They're not fooling around. They're showing you here's what we have. Do they know? But people need to ask, they seem to assume that the government knows a lot more than we do. No, they don't. They don't.
That was my question. Do you think the rumors of the the high government people like the president having agreements with these alien cabals that there's any meat to them?
I've never seen real compelling evidence of that. I know that Roswell occurred.
Mm-hmm.
To what extent did it occur? Did it occur all the way to the little aliens and the autopsies and so on? I haven't seen totally compelling evidence. I have seen very compelling evidence that the intelligence officer, Marcel, did get material. Yes, he got material from the UFO. Yes.
See,
sure.
Now I remember my dad used to get Argosy magazine years ago, and I seem to remember they had pictures. My dad used to get that Argosy magazine years and years ago.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah, scientific magazine. And they had, and I remember I was only I must have been like 6 or 7, but I remember seeing photos of autopsied aliens that were supposed to be from Roswell. Now, I don't know if there's any, truth to that, but that's what I remember.
For me, I like to go and just get the really hard evidence that you can, cross-check and corroborate in all kinds of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I know in terms of material, being the material that comprised the UFO was taken from the site, was put on trucks. Many people saw it. Marcel said he handled it and it had these strange properties where you could bend it around and it would go back into its original shape. And he saw, like hieroglyphics and all of that. I know that that's true. All of that is true. The aliens, I don't know. I'm leaving that open. But all we need to know is what we do know for sure. That's all we need to know, really. It happened. It occurred. It's real. When the mistaken way that the base made, and that base was the only nuclear weapons. They're the ones that dropped the bombs on Hiroshima. The 509. They dropped the bombs on. Now think about this. The biggest UFO flaps started in New Mexico when they were making on the Manhattan Project. They were making the Abrams. That's when the UFOs started zooming in on New Mexico. There were cases before Roswell. Huge Aztec was one of them. Huge cases that were covered up. And people don't make the connection and realize that was where the atomic bomb squadron was, Roswell. Just so happens that they were monitoring that. Rupturing, doing that, exploding the A-bomb. Everything's connected.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in the universe is connected. You do that, and you're disturbing a lot of energy. You're changing, and so if you're going to destroy the planet, you don't think other entities with higher intelligence are going to come in and go, wait a minute. They've actually disabled nuclear bases. They've come in and disabled, and the guy who was the head of the base has admitted it. He admitted decades ago. They came in, they were hovered overhead, they disabled all the missiles. They've disclosed but people aren't paying any attention. And disclosure, what does it mean? It means that, if you go too far, we're going to come in and take over. And you won't have the free will you have. You won't be able to do all the things you're doing because you're too irresponsible. People have to start waking up. We don't have forever to do this.
Well, I'm thinking of some stories that I read, and which reminds me of the Roswell thing. There's been cases over and over like that, like you say, like in Germany, in Britain, where they have come in or a UFO has crashed in those areas because obviously they got too close and they were monitoring. So, I mean, you're right. I mean, people need to take a harder, closer look at this stuff.
As what's going, because it's got the shock impact to people. And then they don't think, when we're shocked, we don't think straight. We don't use our logic. And logic you have to get over all that. And then really start looking at it logically. And what are the patterns? What is it really showing us? And people don't realize that Hollywood has had a big impact on this whole thing psychologically. But Hollywood is based on, to make a story, you have to have tension and conflict, drama. So they make aliens hostile.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing, okay, let's go back to the earliest, in the late 1940s, the Air Force actually acquiesced to public pressure and did investigations. And what they came up with is, yes, there's something to all this, but it doesn't pose a threat to us. That's what they concluded, and that's what they actually said. And somehow people interpreted that as they were denying there were UFOs. They weren't. And Project Blue Book never denied there were UFOs. The U.S. government has never done that officially. If you look at the record, they've never done it. They've made it ambiguous. They exist. We don't know. We don't know what they are. But they don't pose a threat. Only in Hollywood movies they pose a threat, because that's not who they're not here. They could take over the planet in a second. But that's not their objective. Like we were just talking, they're monitoring. They're monitoring what's going on. Even these cattle mutilations and things they do.
Here's a question I have. Yeah, I just had a thought about the Bible. Yeah. And getting back to the ancient study of everything. And if you look at the Bible, there's certain stuff in there that kind of points to aliens.
Definitely.
What do you think about it?
Well, the Bible, keep in mind that only in the last 150 years, less than that actually, I'd say the last 100, did historians find out, when they started translating the Sumerian tablets, that the Bible is based on the Sumerian tablets. The Sumerian tablets are thousands of years older, and they contain the biblical flood. In other words, the Bible drew its information from the Sumerians. What did the Sumerians say? God came to Earth, lived here, eventually decided to create human beings to serve them. Well, the Bible says the same thing. Only it says, and the truth is, it doesn't say what people have been taught. People have been taught that God created man. But what does it actually say? It says that we created man in our image, because the Elohim, El is God, Elohim means gods. And that's all that's in the first chapter of Genesis is Elohim. The gods created mankind in their likeness, in their image. Well, it makes sense. It has to be physical beings. Otherwise, they don't have DNA. They can't make physical beings. That's what it says. It's point blank there in verse 26. Let us make man in our image. Our didn't say God. One singular, it said our image. So you're right. That's exactly what. And then it goes to chapter 6. Anybody that's read the Bible knows in chapter 6 of Genesis, they looked down, the gods looked down on earth, found women there, came down and abducted them. They created hybrids, the Nephilim, the giants. And it doesn't just mean physical giant stature. They had superpowers. They had paranormal powers. And if you look at where did everything happen in the Bible? It starts in Samaria. It quickly goes to Canaan. And Canaan is where Baalbek is located. And Canaan is also where Jerusalem is located. If you go to the foundation, the bottom of the Temple Mount, you'll find the same kind of stones there as you find in Baalbek. 500-ton stones that look exactly like the ones of Baalbek. The Nephilim did all that. That's the great works that they did, and the Bible even points to it. They were too powerful. They were too far beyond it. The planet couldn't handle them. And so they decided, this genetic experiment has got to be terminated. What happens? Wipes.
Hey, Now that goes back. Now that brings me back to like every great civilization. You go back through time. The Romans, you know what happened with them? You think that's the same thing going on? Is that they get to a certain point, and maybe they get too big for their too big for their britches, so to say, and then whoever is watching, terminates it or makes the changes.
Yeah, and and that brings up a really interesting point. That it's almost as if you look at it, see if you even go back to what does the Bible really say about the early human beings that are there and building the tower, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're building a tower, and what do the gods do? The gods say they're going too fast. They're going too fast. We got to stop this. They're too unified. We've got to divide them. See, it's the beginning, divide and conquer, destroy the tower, scatter the people, and make them start over again. You see, you're saying it, basically. There's a pattern in there, where we go so far, and then it stops, and it gets rewound, and we go back and start over again. And we've lost the previous civilization's knowledge in the process. So we start over on a different basis, right? We don't do pyramids. We don't know why they did pyramids. Our own ancestors, we don't know why they did it. And still trying to figure it out. I think I know why they did it now. It's part of a communications system. It was part of some of the sites were energy production, like the Great Pyramid and the Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico, that has both mercury and mica in it, and the whole site. They were producing energy there. Well, what do our archaeologists and historians say? Every time they come to a mystery, they go, well, it was a ritual. It was part of a ceremony. It's a ritual object. Oh God, come on! It's boilerplate. They're just repeat it. It's like doesn't mean anything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was a ritual. Oh, it was a ritual. Really? You know that, huh? You know that you don't even know. They do not know who built the pyramid in Mexico. They admit it. We don't know who built this. Oh, okay. Well, good. I'm glad you admitted it for a change. And now we can try to get to work and figure it out, as much as we can. I think you get the point that I'm making, that we've got to find this out. I have a real passion about it, right? I don't expect everybody else to. I don't. But everybody, it takes a lot of time to do this. It really takes a lot of. I've been at this for a long time, and I'm so grounded in it from what I've learned and continuous involvement, decade after decade, right? Mm-hmm. But I know other people. They got their jobs, they got their families. They, a little bit of time to. Oh, well, this is interesting. I'll look into. Well, you can only do so much, and then we've learned here in America recently that you better look at who your sources are, where you get your information.
Yeah.
Because you can really be misled and have a worldview that doesn't have anything to do with reality. That's a lesson I've learned here recently, in these recent years. And people can do that. Everybody can make up and live in their own reality to a point, right? There are social realities and pressures that come in that we all have to deal with. But then there's a lot of it where you can just go off and live in fantasies or any kind of belief you want to. And that also, though, can lead us to chaos. Point blank. And that's happened to a lot of civilizations. That happened to the Romans.
Yeah.
They stopped paying attention to what was going on in Rome. And eventually they got attacked by the barbarians while they were all over the world, trying to conquer everybody. And their Rome got dissolved.
This is true. Hey, I just had a thought. One more thing for you. The Nazca lines. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. Fascinating. Yeah, they are. the Nazca culture in general, people, I mean, the lines they're just fascinating. I think a lot of things when people look at things and they have an intuition, a lot of times it's right. People realize instantly, wait a minute, how could people on the ground make these things that are only really visible from the air?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they don't have the perspective of getting up in the air and designing them. Right? And there's some of those things that when you look at them, you see it looks like a highway. And in order to make that flat surface on the top of a mountain, they had to cut the mountain. They had to take the ridge and remove it. You know what I'm saying? Have you seen it? It looks like a highway and it goes for miles. And you can see it used to be a ridge with a pointed top. Now it's a flat. And so somebody had to remove that ridge top and make it a flat surface. Well, where did the dirt go? Where did the dirt and rocks go? You don't see it anywhere. And we have rock cut caves like that in China and in India where, 500,000 tons, 1,000,000 tons of rock had to be removed to make this cave. And when they go out to look for where the waste rock go, it's not there. Somebody had the technology to just make it disappear. You see, when I run into things like that, I realize, okay, we're on a whole different level now. Because no one can possibly explain that. Now, could we do it today? Yeah, laser technology and so on.
Mm-hmm.
We could melt rock and do that. But could people with primitive tools thousands of years ago do it? No. So we get back to the thing of this psychological dissonance. And we got to upgrade. Okay, either our ancestors had these superpowers, which we lost, which is hard to accept, right?
Mm-hmm.
To me, they would have communicated something about how they did things. And you don't find it. The Egyptians never claimed they had any superpowers. In fact, the Egyptians never said they built the pyramids. There are no pharaohs. There's 118 pyramids. No pharaoh was ever found in any of them. Well, then they weren't tombs, were they? And what the archaeologists, the Egyptologists will tell you is, oh, well, they were all taken out by robbers. No, they weren't, because we found 3 different sarcophagus that were untouched, with the lids still on and sealed. They opened them up, they even televised it, and nothing was inside. Oh, okay. See, and what do we do? Because we are getting to this place where our science is demanding certain things, and then we have these things that don't fit the way we think. And we are going to end up in a lot of intellectual collective chaos about this. And we're getting there now because people are 50 years ago even, people weren't that interested. They didn't pay any attention. People do now because of the internet, right?
Mm-hmm.
It changed everything. We have immediate access to all this information. And people want to know. They can think for themselves and they look and go, wait a minute, this doesn't add up. So then we've got to apply the pressure to historians, to that community and say, we're fed up. This doesn't work. And why don't you just admit it and let's start over? We've got these supercomputers. We've got all this data. We can feed it into the supercomputers. We can start coming out with answers. We can. We've got artificial intelligence now that's incredibly swift at processing data. Just bing, bing. I know I'm throwing a lot of things out there.
Yeah, no. No flyby on me. I find it fascinating. I've been looking into this stuff for years.
Well, my goal and my mission has been to make this accessible to people and put it in a logical format that people can look at and go, oh, okay, that makes sense. I can understand that. If we can't do it with our current technology, sure as hell, our predecessors 5,000 years ago didn't do it. Come on. No. if we got to build a custom-made truck in order to move a 300-ton stone, and there's 700-ton stones in Egypt, we got a problem, and we better figure it out. And our scientists better get open. Now, the thing is, if you bring physicists into the picture, you get a different view than what historians will give you, because they're open-minded, and they'll go, no, come on. It just didn't happen this way. And I think I try to, although I think it's difficult to bring the paranormal into it, especially in survey, because I am open to the possibility that the Atlanteans did have, as we talked earlier, that kind of paranormal technology. They could move stone. And I think Edgar Casey, I'm sure you know who he is, who he was. He mentioned that. He mentioned that that's how they moved the stones. And that's actually what Ed Leedskalnin, who built Pearl Castle, said. He was able to, he had rediscovered that technology, and he could move those stones himself alone. Okay, I'm open to that, but like you said earlier, to a certain point. But the Great Pyramid is beyond that point. I don't care if you couldn't build that. It's too precise. It's too gargantuan.
Right.
There's a lot of, and I hear that you're doing a lot of work, and you can go to my sites and look what I post every day, and ask me questions or research directions and so on. I'm open to. I share my knowledge. Some people don't. They want to keep it, and they want to be credited. But no, I'm open to sharing what I know.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being on. I appreciate it. My gosh, I learned a lot. And good. I would love to have you on again at some point, because I'm absolutely fascinated with it. And if you could share your websites or places where people could contact you, or like you say, ask questions or whatever, please do.
Okay. I have an author site, and I think you just have to go Will Hart, author, and you'll get to my Facebook author page. I post a lot on there, and I have a lot, probably have, 35,000 followers on there. A lot. I probably get 10,000, hits a day on my posts. So there's a lot of people that follow it, and we exchange, information. I answer questions. When people make comments or ask questions, I try to answer everything. Then I have Atlantis Risen, which is the book, and it's just called Atlantis Risen, and you can go to that page and get my Atlantis. I have a lot of posts of my own posts on there and videos and so on, but I'm going to try to publish the book in the next 2 months. And then we're going to put together an expedition, like I said. And now I don't know when it's going to be, though. Maybe this year, but it might be next year. It depends on COVID, if we get control of this little monster or not. And thanks for inviting me. I'll come back anytime.
Absolutely. I would love to have you back. All right. You have a good evening, sir. I'm so fascinated. I'm going to write all this stuff down. I'm just intrigued. I'm going to go check out your site on Facebook more, too. I really want to look at all that stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Okay, guys, that was great. I've been fascinated with that stuff since I was a kid. I can tell you. Boy, I'll tell you. This was incredible for me. Anyway, so next week we're changing it up. Like I said, every other week we're going to be doing news stories and stuff. So next week I've got a friend of mine from Facebook that I've known for a few years, and they help people to bring awareness to Nigerian phone scam. Not phone scams, but Nigerian love scams online. People that get involved with Nigerian scammers. And so they're going to be on with us next week talking about that and how you can spot them, and what to do about it if you do spot them. Again, thank you guys for coming tonight, and we'll see you again next week at 6:30. Have a